All right. Welcome everybody to the next episode of Full Send Off Road Podcast. Um, I'm Alex, and of course, you got Aaron. No Bruce again. Uh, I guess, I never even asked if he was going to be available.
I thought he said he wasn't going to be available until Wednesday.
Well, I think that's what he said too, but I guess I need to ask anyway. Because if we have to re-record this, we can. So no big deal.
I think that's what he said in his message.
I'm pretty sure that's what pretty sure that's what he said. Also.
Yeah, out until Wednesday.
Yeah, what I thought.
So we'll just bang one out. Like if we would have planned this a little bit better, we could have did it from the podcast room.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah, I mean, well, I called you last night and was like,
Oh,
"Hey," but that's all
anyway, so
right. Hold on, he already texted back. He said tonight. I said now. So we'll see what. Hmm. So we'll see. But so talking to a few people, and we've had some feedback on the podcast, and they have been requesting a little bit more information when we talk about tech stuff. Uh, I know I'm not too techy when it comes to diving into that stuff, but Captain Slow over there is nothing. Just stare at your phone,
disclaimer: these are opinions of Captain Slow. Please do not
right?
take them literally. Half the time I talk out of my ass.
Uh, yeah, and most of these opinions are all based on firsthand experiences. They're not didn't go to school for any of this. Didn't uh, this is trial and error. My experiences are all trial and error, and then learning from older people or learning from others and taking their experiences and their information and knowledge and applying it to what works for me. So, what we speak on here may not work for you, right? Right.
Sure,
That's
sure. It
right.
depends on what you want to dive into.
Well, hey, you know what? Because there's shit that you do that I don't do, and there's shit that I do that you don't do, and we're
Yeah, but that
family.
uh, but
You set up your machine. Yeah, but
we have
for
two different
instance,
types of writing styles.
we
So
that's what I'm getting at. So, for instance, tonight we're going to talk about suspension, and I don't know why my hat keeps disappearing, but I look like I don't have a head when it does. Um, look, see, look. Yeah. Anyway, so when we talk about suspension, I set up my suspension completely different than what Aaron does. Aaron's got a lot more experience when it comes to certain aspects of suspension. I'm normally going for comfort myself, or depending on how the machine is built in the first place, I'm going for maximum tire size or maximum clearance to make sure I don't rub or something like that. So you sacrifice ride for that. So bear in mind when we talk about suspension, Aaron and I are brothers and we talk about stuff all the time and we discuss on how we're going to set up machines, but we set up our machines completely separate than each other.
I don't, as far as setup goes, I try to get as close to stock. These manufacturers out here do a great job and a hell of a lot smarter than what I am as far as figuring out suspension geometry. Now, granted, that being said, down here where we ride, a factory machine is few and far between. Um,
Yes.
we put lift kits on, we put bigger tires on, we do Ford A-arms on the front end. Some of these suspensions actually lengthen the wheelbase and the ass end also. So
Yeah,
You are
for instance,
chain.
I just did the full suspension on mine as far as new arms, new trailing arms, new radius rods, new A arms,
Yeah,
completely
so
different ball joint setup. Like
that stuff extending the wheelbase
it changes
vice.
geometry.
Yeah, absolutely. Extending the wheelbase or even shortening the wheelbase changes geometry. When you put in a lift kit, that changes the geometry. It the whether you're running portals or you're running stock hubs, that puts different angles on those ball joints, or even if you do a ball joint delete, that puts different angles on those pivot points. That's why you hear a lot of people complain once they go to portals, or if they do a ball joint delete and go to straight Heim suspension, everybody bitches and moans and groans about they lose their steering.
Well,
It
you've
the steering
that
becomes harder, or the turning radius is a hell of a lot worse than what it was from the factory, and it's
well,
because
you're
you're changing all that geometry.
well, not just
Um,
changing geometry. When you go to Heims, you're limiting your articulation on your steering angles.
yes and no, because there are a couple of machines out there that come factory that are set up with Heims already. So I
Right,
know
but
down.
I'm talking about the people. So you're putting in a factory built machine with Heims versus taking a machine that was designed one way, cutting off the ball joints and welding a an adapter to put a Heim. It wasn't
what
designed that way, so therefore you are changing the factory steering
correct,
angles.
but what I'm getting at is you can get the same turning radius out of a Heim setup if it's done properly. Now, granted,
Yeah, but all these
that's why
90%.
people go and they have engineering degrees
But
and
yeah,
are
but
able to
what I'm
lay
getting
this out on a computer
okay,
where we eyeball that shit.
that's what I'm saying is 90% of your people out there that are going, oh man, I keep blowing ball joints. I think I'm going to do a ball joint delete. They've got a buddy who can weld. And because I've thought about it, I ain't gonna lie, I've thought about it. Is why would I pay that extra money and put it in the shop and let somebody who knows what they're doing do it when I got a buddy that can weld and we can just take measurements and slap it on? Am I wrong?
No, you're not wrong. But that being said, too,
So that being said,
there's some companies that sell.
you're not
There's
gonna set what I'm getting at though is you're not gonna set there. And I'm not trying to like argue or anything. We're trying to dive into a suspension a little bit, but you're sitting there going, all right, well, if you got an engineering degree, you can get this and this and this. I don't care about that. I care about the average person, my fat ass being a prime example. Uh, that's not what I'm doing. So when I'm talking, let's talk about suspension here. I'm talking the average person that just slapped portals, wheels, and tires and changed their A arms. That's complaining about it being a stiff ride. What are some of the things that we could do to mitigate those situations? Barring sending it to a shop and having it completely gone through by an engineer.
uh, okay. So if you want to dive down that, what I was gonna say
We're not
before.
diving down the well. It's this
Well,
is
no, no,
this
no,
is
no,
the
no,
average side of
no.
off-roading, so I don't want to
Okay,
get into a
I
whole
understand that,
engineering
but
thing.
that's what I was trying to get to is there's a couple of companies that offer DIY ball joint delete, and they've done a lot of the work and the research for you, so
Yes.
the average Joe can do it.
You're right, but you still lose steering angle
Oh, absolutely, but that's just
because
it.
the machine was not designed for that from the get-go.
But that's one of the caveats. I would say probably 90% of the people that put not even changing and going away from ball joints, just putting portals on, understand that they're going to give up a couple of things to have the gear reduction, to have the wider stance and the built-in lift kit.
Absolutely.
So when you buy portals, 90% of the people understands, all right, I'm gonna give up some steering
Mhm.
to have the lift so I can run these bigger tires, which
And
it
top
is what
speed.
it is what it is, you know. Now granted, there is some things you can mitigate, you know. The the guys, I don't want to I don't want to I'm not knocking on it because I've done it myself. to run the biggest tire possible. You jack the springs up, stiffen run those shock collars down and compress those springs. And so you can get that huge tire underneath it with as little lift as possible. You're basically putting the lift in the shock itself. That being said,
Sacrificing ride,
you're sacrificing rad quality.
sacrificing articulation.
Yeah, you have no up travel in the suspension whatsoever. You have shitty angles on the axles, so you're wearing on those axles on the CV cups. You're beating your teeth out of your mouth driving down the trail. What used to be a comfortable ride to go over a small rock, something the size of a 4x4, it's like you're running over a 2-foot tall speed bump at that point.
Right.
I
so like we're I understand all that. So I guess my question would be, if I would say, I know a little bit, I don't know a whole lot, but I don't know a lot. Like we just did the suspension for the Honda.
Mhm.
I'm running 6-inch portals. I put the TTC arms and long travel kit. Essentially turned it from an X to an R, which added 4 inches, so on and so forth. Now, because that has changed the geometry of it, that's changed pivot points, that's changed approach angle, departure angle, that's changed axle angle, that's changed everything, right? We know that.
Mhm.
We adjusted the shocks, and
Mhm.
right now my fronts are almost completely opened up. So my collars have been completely unwound, almost completely, to try to get my axle angles back flattened out, because now some people may disagree with this, but my personal experience is my axles have lasted longer and survived the trips by being less than 30 degrees. Most of the time I try to be less than 20 degrees when it comes to axle angle.
Well, so here's my thought as
So,
far as axle angles goes.
well, no, hold
It
on. So let me get to my question, and we'll move to axle angles here in a little bit.
Okay.
And this is
Okay.
a prerequisite. Is that all right to soften the suspension up that much, soften the springs up that much, or should I have some preload? Preload being the collars tightened down a little bit, putting a little bit of load on the springs.
Okay, so that with that question, my experience with shocks, regardless of the manufacturer, they have designed a shock to have X amount of inches of travel from
Mm-hmm.
full compression to full stroke.
Right.
Why my thought process is why would you stiffen a spring up to have, let's say the shock has 10 inches of total travel from fully compressed to fully extended. It's 10 inches total of travel. So if I run that shock collar down to give me ride height, at ride height, my shock is extended at 8 inches. So I only have 2 inches of droop. So I have 8 inches of compression.
That's what she said.
But only 2 inches of droop. I would rather be closer to 4 inches and be sitting there in the center where I have 5 inches of up travel and 5 inches of droop. Because that spring is compressed by putting preload in to give you that lift, you're taking away from that spring rate. So let's say that spring is designed, it takes 1 inch to come. Just let me finish what I'm saying.
It's not what I asked, though.
You're asking about
I'm asking, is it gonna hurt anything for me not having that much I really don't have much preload.
No, and that's what I'm getting at with that preload. When you run that shock collar down and put preload in it to basically lift it up,
mm-hmm.
that spring, I'm just using rough numbers here, so just to make it easy. So when they do spring rates, let's say it's 100 pounds, it's 100-pound spring, right? So it takes 1 inch or 100 pounds to compress that spring 1 inch. It takes 200 pounds to compress that spring 2 inches. Follow what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So by running that shock collar down to give you lift, you're compressing that spring and you're putting more preload in it. So now, let's say you ran it down 3 inches and you've put 3 inches of preload in that spring. Now you have 300 pounds of pressure on that spring already. So for you to use that up travel that you have in that shock to move it up another inch, you got to have 400 pounds of pressure to push that spring up. You have to have
Right.
another 100 pounds of pressure.
Right.
So
So I get that. Like I understand. I understand a little bit how preload works as far as for tender springs and stuff like that. Like it takes X amount of pressure to compress X amount
Mhm.
of distance. Here's my deal though. That's why I asked is we have backed the preload off. Now I have aftermarket tender springs. I'm running Bandit tender springs, which are completely different than stock. Now
Right.
everybody's machine is going to be different. We all know this.
Right.
Everybody's if they have tender springs, don't have tender springs, they're all going to be a different spring rate. For your adjustments, if you do want to do adjustments yourself, you need to make sure that you know what springs you have and what your stock suspension is supposed to be. That'll give you a great estimate on what you can and can't do or what you should and shouldn't do. But because I've changed my suspension up so much, I'm looking at we have backed off that preload so much. Is it better to have preload set in it or
You don't
because
want
like
the
it's to
you don't
to
want the
me it's
spring
super
flopping around.
well it's not flopping around but I'm just saying what I'm getting is like it's like super soft but my deal is we're at like 16 17 degrees right now for the axle angle and if I put any more in it we're going to get to that 20 25 degree where I don't want to be so
So if you
now
were
we are doing limit straps so I mean
okay, but that limit straps is going to be under droop.
right
Now we
do you
don't
think I'll bottom out the shock is what I'm getting at
know.
okay then
No,
I'm not
because
going to worry
even
about it
even even where I'm set at on mine, and my buggy is just about flat on the arms.
yeah
I think I've only hit the bump stops once or twice under full flex, and
okay
that was rock crawling.
then I'm not
Now,
going to worry about it
if you're if you were desert racing, running in the dunes, jumping it,
70 mile an hour fucking yeah
then I would probably be a little bit more concerned about preload on it and how stiff a springs am I running on it. Now that goes that kind of opens up shock dampening and rebound. And then you start talking about different spring packs, or excuse me, not spring packs, piston packs, what kind of oil, nitrogen levels in the shock itself, so on and so forth. Um, I don't have any experience tearing down. I'll just use, for example, the Fox shocks that I have on my personally have on my machine. I would love to learn more about that. Um, I've never dove into that per se. Where my shock tuning comes into um
So
is from
so
our
hold,
is from
hold that
RC
thought just for a
cars.
second. Hold that thought just for a second. So that being said, shock therapy or any of these shock companies, Fox, if you wouldn't mind, Aaron would love to come tour your facility and learn a little bit more because he's a geek.
Absolutely. And I watch and follow shock therapy on YouTube. They do Tech
Uh,
Tuesday,
I
and
have learned so much.
they have all kinds of great references and explain what they do to change valving on shocks, so on and so forth. Now, granted, that those guys are more geared towards riding in the dunes and race setups. Oh, excuse me. But for what we do here in the south, with the mud parks and trail riding, I Fox, Walker Evans, Bandit UTV suspension, they all make great shocks. I'm familiar with the Bandit UTV suspension shocks. I'm very familiar with their product. I'm familiar
I've got Bandit
with
tender springs
Fox.
that I put on the Talon, and I love them. Like
They make it.
they were a night and day difference going from the stock tenders to the Bandit tenders. So
I'm a firm believer, and I told you when I did mine on my KRX that the tender springs make a world of difference. That being said, too, I think a lot of it, as far as we'll just go back to the lift kit aspect. So you have a lift kit in the front of your buggy,
yes,
Alex. You
yep,
have that frame brace, so it changes the upper shock mount location.
yep,
Standing a shock vert, typically your shocks are laid over from the factory for packaging reasons, to get whatever the manufacturer decided to do to lay that shock over. When you put some of these upper shock mount location for a lift kit, when you stand that shock up, you're essentially, yes, you're getting some lift out of it, but by affecting that, you're also potentially changing how the machine affects that spring rate. Even though that spring rate didn't change, you're affecting the load on that shock by tipping it up or laying it down. We had this discussion when you were talking about doing the long travel kit on the Talon. I think
whether to take it out or leave it in.
Whether to take it out, I like that setup because it basically is the upper shock tower brace, frame brace. Mm-hmm. But I think you should lay the shock back down. It'll stiffen the front end up a little bit. The Honda Talon doesn't have a factory sway bar in the front. So that by laying it back down, you're essentially, it's kind of like changing spring rate without changing the spring. You're kind of stiffening the spring rate up because
you're compensating without change. Really,
not only that,
not adding parts.
Correct. And the not only that, the nice thing about laying the spring down is you actually get more shock travel out of a shock by laying it down versus having it stand vertically. So for the tire to move 2 inches up, you might only be doing a 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch travel on the shock shaft itself.
Yeah,
versus the shock being vertical, it goes up, the wheel goes up 2 inches. That shock shaft goes up 2 inches also.
Right. So yeah. If it's vertical, it's no longer a 1-to-1. When it's
vertical, it's 1-to-1.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. When you're vertical and you're pushing, so your wheel is pushing the shock vertically, it is a 1-to-1 transfer. If it is laid over, I can push, and the shock is then it's like, all right, I'm gonna geek out for a minute. Oh, excuse me. Angled armor, a flat piece of steel that you shoot that's a 1/4 inch thick is a 1/4 inch thick. That's what you're going through. If you angle that piece of plate steel, let's just say 45 degrees, because that's a really easy number, you've nearly doubled the size, if not doubled the size of the thickness.
Yeah,
that round now has to travel through. So it's taking more. It's for your wheel to travel 1 inch up. It's no longer taking 1 inch of the shock. It's only taking, say, I don't know the numbers exactly, but it's no longer taking that 1 inch. It's only taking a 1/2 inch.
Yeah, and it's kind of one of those deals to where,
and that's where the numbers, crunching the numbers to figure out the geometry.
Absolutely, and
but for the
average rider,
for the average person, normal person,
the biggest thing is like these companies. So Fox, me and you both have Fox shocks on both of our machines. We have 2 totally different machines, but we both run Fox shocks. So you have the live valve setting. So you potentially only have 3 settings on that live valve setting. Without the Hess override, you only have 3 settings, correct?
Technically 2.
two, so firm and normal, or sport and
normal and
normal,
sport.
normal
Yeah.
and sport. Okay, so
But that's
but
not
on
how
your,
live valve works.
I know, but
It's
I'm trying.
active. Live valve is active.
Correct, but
So
on your
it's constantly taking inputs to adjust valving. Yeah.
on your two-seater Talon with Fox shocks, you only had three settings on those
Yeah,
shocks,
soft
correct?
medium. Yeah, soft medium hard.
So I have Fox shocks also on mine. I have 21 or 24 settings on my shocks.
Yeah, you have what?
On
Soft
those on
medium hard. You have
no,
valve adjustment.
it's on a clicker. It's 21 different positions on the clicker.
Oh.
I
I was
because of
thinking
the
the X3s. The X3s have the knob up top, and then you can
what
adjust a valve on the bottom, and then there's
well, and
also a screw on top. And
that's what I was going to get at was the Bandit UTV suspension shocks that I had on my Articat. I had a compression adjustment and a rebound adjustment. The Walker
right.
Evans are, I believe, are also set up the same way too. And I think some of the Fox shocks are done that way. I know Elka's are done that way. Now, granted, they're all great shocks, and it's whatever you prefer. If you prefer Fox, then you run Fox. Not a lot of us, when we buy a new machine, not a lot of us change shocks. It's just that's the shocks that came with the machine, and we just run it.
Well, and for the average person, so let's just
What
for I'm just layman's terms here. The
what I
average
was
person who
get
goes out and buys a razor, let's just say a 1000. It's their first UTV. They got it on a decent deal. They want to get into this world. They're not going to go out and spend $2,800, $3,000 on a brand new shock setup.
no, and I'm
And
not telling it.
stock
I'm not
shocks are
telling
not
anybody to
bad
do that,
shocks. They're
and I'm
just a
not.
very basic setup.
What I'm getting at though is like somebody that goes out and buys a UTV, regardless of whatever machine they buy, if they have adjustable shocks on their machine, drive
A
their
little bit of
machine,
time to learn.
uh, drive your machine, put it on the firmest settings, drive it down the same piece of road or trail, put it on the softest settings, and drive it down the same road and see how the machine feels. You might like a softer setting. I prefer a soft setting on my shocks for the riding that I do.
Yeah, and well, and that's one of the things that I wanted to point out is your suspension setup is gonna be dictated by the style of riding.
Correct. Absolutely.
The guys who are running, in the deserts, the sand dune style,
They're going to run a firmer shock setup.
those guys, they're running a completely different tire and wheel setup, which is going to change your suspension setup. The suspension is not just shocks. Your suspension is wheels, tires. It's geometry of the steering. It's geometry of your A arms. It's your shocks. It's your springs. It's your tenders. It's if you have aftermarket seats, all that translates into comfort, into what you feel from the steering. That all is in suspension. Prime example of that is I don't know. I know I do. I watch a lot of these like drift shows and uh the rally racing and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of these cars that they build, they're able to shave seconds on. Now these are professional drivers, of course, but they're able to shave seconds by tuning suspension, not adding horsepower. Because they're able to
Absolutely.
dive into the corner a little harder. They're coming out straighter. Like
Absolutely. And
so, what with
that's
that whole
where
conversation is the style of riding that you're doing, what you're doing with the machine, is going to dictate what you want to do with the suspension. Somebody who's cruising the beach, like we have of here that is available, is all right. They probably want it Cadillac as soft as possible. They don't care what the cornering's like. They're not going to care what it's like going over a jump. They want to get in it, hit a little bump, and not know that that bump's there. And then you've got people that are into hardcore rock crawling, where you want your suspension set up to absorb and follow the contours of those rocks that you're climbing.
and that's kind of where I have my suspension set up. I try to run it as soft as possible. I want the machine to work over the obstacle. I don't want the machine to jump over an obstacle. And
If
that's
if we were
I
building, if
I'm
my machine
old.
now that I have for cruising and trail riding would not be the same machine. If I was to take that same machine and go, okay, I'm going to build it to race it, the suspension is not going to be the same.
Well, I'll use that Arctic Cat that I used to have, for example. I had Fox non-adjustable shocks on that machine. We changed springs on it. I could go out and ride that machine for 6-7 hours out on the trail. And by the time we were done for the evening, I felt like I had been beat up all day long. Like I was physically exhausted. When I went to the Bandit UTV, adjustable shocks on it, same tire package, same lift. That was the only thing I changed was the shock package. Once I got that shock package set up to my liking, I was able to ride all day, and I wasn't as fatigued by bouncing around in the machine doing this, riding the same mud park at the end of the day. Now, granted, going from that machine with that last iteration to my KRX was another big jump. I don't feel I can ride 8 to 10 hours in my machine currently the way it's set up with factory shocks to my settings, and I don't feel exhausted physically at the end of the day. But that's kind of back to my riding style. I want my experience. I want my machine set up as plush as possible. And like you said earlier, wheel and tire package, that makes a big difference. Don't get me wrong, the 24-inch wheels look cool with 40-inch tires, 44, 46-inch tires. It looks cool.
We all know
I,
you're old school,
I,
give you
I am old
15-inch
school.
wheels with 45-inch freaking tires. You want to look like you're riding on balloons.
I,
If y'all can't tell, I'm tired of hearing this.
that's not what I was getting at. You know, I have a 40-inch tire with a 24-inch wheel. I also run a lower tire pressure than a lot of people run too. I run 10 to 12 pounds of tire pressure in my tires.
Right, and I'm running 20.
Where somebody else, well, Alex, for example, he's running a 38 or a 37 on a 22, which is basically about the same amount of sidewall. He's running 20 PSI in his tire. I want the tire to contour over the obstacles. A, it's a bigger footprint, but B, it helps with softening the ride up, running a lower tire pressure. Yes,
Well, and it works
there is
with
some inherent
the
risk. I might
the
puncture a
type of
sidewall or pinch
well, I
a
was going to say
sidewall.
the type of riding you do, the design of the tire. If you're running a radial, you're going to want to run the PSIs that the tire actually calls for because that's sidewall deflection, whole 9 yards. If you're running a super soft compound sticky tire, you're going to run softer compounds because you're climbing rocks and like you said,
Well,
you
and
want it
it's
to
not,
you want it to contour. That is a rock tire. That's what it's designed for.
but that what I'm getting at though is you running
You
those
buy a
lower tire
tractor
pressures.
tire and it is a stiff tire. So you don't have to you don't have to run the big high tire pressures, but
I'm not running at high speeds either. I don't have to worry about folding a tire over at
right.
40 mile an hour.
Right. No, the biggest
So
concern
I run a little
is
bit. I have to worry about pinching a tire or
getting mud in between the bead.
exactly rolling a tire off a bead if I'm in a weird angle,
Yep.
and that's the consequence that I have to take by running a low tire pressure,
But
so
what we're getting, what I'm really wanting to push is, and this is what has been projected to me from or asked of me, talking to people about the podcast and what can we do to make it a little better and what would y'all like to hear. Which, by all means, send in your suggestions. Make sure to email us, comment on our TikToks, comment on the Facebook page, comment on YouTube, of course. Let us know what you want to listen to, what you want to hear, what you want us to talk about. But the people I have talked to are the ones that we've touched on little stuff like this here and there in a lot of these podcasts that we've done already, a lot of our episodes, but we've never really dove into it. And what was asked was, hey, for somebody who's never done this before and deciding to get into four wheelers, side by sides, dirt bikes, whatever, Can you give a little bit more insight? That way they're not, if they listen to the podcast, they might learn something. I'm not telling them that they're going to, but they might. So I hope listening to this, people understand, it's not just as, it's not cut and dry. I can't tell you what the right answer is. Aaron can't tell you what the right answer is.
There
We can
isn't a
just tell
right
you,
answer.
we can just tell you our opinions on things and, take the information for what it's worth. Me personally, I tell everybody, even before they even go buy a side by side or anything, sit down and figure out what you plan on doing with it. And that will dictate A, the type of machine you're going to buy, but B, it's also going to dictate the type of writing you're going to be doing and how you want that machine to perform.
My deal is like, even if you've already bought a machine, learn your machine. Like, learn what options you have with the machine, because you might be able to do a couple of clicks on your shocks and it become a completely different experience.
Vice versa, uh, with that whole conversation, and that it's how many of us sit and look at our phones over dumb stuff while we're chilling, waiting on something else to happen, either at work, at home, whatever. Take that time to go, hey, you know what? I just noticed that my side by side that I just bought used has Elka shocks on it. Let me look these up.
Yeah.
You may not understand everything. Like I just had the shock therapy on my other computer. I had the shock therapy page opened up. I didn't understand a lot of the stuff that they were talking about, but I understood a few things, like setting ride height. The whole crossover thing, I still don't completely understand how that works. I know it's something about load transfer from one spring to another if you have dual rate springs, but I don't understand it completely. But setting ride height, setting your load on your rings, and making sure that proper angles are achieved. Like I understand those, but I've been in the game long enough to understand.
I would say probably 90%, 95% of your riders out there, you're not going to change shock angles. Shock angles are going to stay the same, whether the machine's factory or the machine has portals on it.
Yeah, you're either going to add preload or take preload out. Like
That's
realistically,
probably the biggest thing that's going to change.
as we call
I
them, snail shocks, the
Yeah.
ones that only have the 5 clicks. Everybody cranks it up to the stiffest setting because,
They're
well,
trying to get up.
I can get an extra half inch.
Yeah. The
Well,
downside with that is you're limiting that shock up travel. You're going to make the ride a little bit rougher,
yep,
So I just
absolutely.
want people to understand, sorry, if you make that type of change, your ride's going to be a little bit more rougher. Yes, you might be able to clear that, go from a 31 to a 32-inch tire. You might be able to clear that tire and it not rub anymore.
So,
Is that a sacrifice you're willing to take?
and I had this conversation with somebody the other day, is because they said, well, what about those lift kits that you see that the front's some sort of bracket
Mm-hmm.
and the rear is some rings that you put on your shocks? And I tell them, try to stay away from that. And the reason being is because to me, it's the same as cranking your preload.
Um, I'm
Just be
fine with I'm fine with the bracket lift.
No,
I don't have a
I'm talking about the rings that you put in between either in between a tender and a mainspring, or you
I was
just put
getting
it on your
I was
mainspring.
getting I was getting there. So my only deal with those rings you put in the shocks, regardless whether it goes between the tender spring and the mainspring, or if it just goes on top between a cup and a spring, you're limiting
Your travel.
you're limiting the up travel of that shock. Not only that, you got to think of it, it's like adding preload. So
That's
you're forcing
literally
that
what I just said.
you're forcing that shock to full extension with more pressure.
It's quite literally what I just said.
Now the inside of these shocks, they underneath those spring packs, they have dampeners to try to minimize that shock going to full extension. From it hitting hard at full extension. I have seen photos and videos of shock going to full extension and it completely comes apart. Just because it went to full extension and blew the bottom of the shock body out. those are few and far between. Um, but it is a possibility, and that's where your limit straps come into play to try to mitigate that issue from happening.
which
Um,
hopefully those will be in a couple days for mine.
uh,
And
you know,
then, oh, and this is once again, this is all good information. Take it with, well, for instance, just take it with a grain of salt.
I'm
I'm
not
not an expert.
I'm not either.
Never claimed to be.
I'm just going off of my experiences and pulling stuff from where I did race, and shock setups from that racing scenario. Um, and it does make a big difference. And I've been doing off-roading for, gosh, 25, 30 years now. Since I was a teenager, since I was old enough to start driving,
Yeah, go
you
ahead.
know,
Tell him how old you are. Go ahead. Tell him.
old as
Tell him.
dirt,
Tell
old
him
as
how old
dirt.
you are.
Um,
I thought you just
and
scratched your head, something fell out, and you were about to look at it and be like, "Ooh, what's this?"
I lost your earbud. But the that's pretty much the biggest thing I could say is, like, play around with the shock settings on your shocks. Those clickers, the compression and rebound settings. If you have those adjustments on your shocks, play around with them. See what they do. Take a half hour
Play
and
with your toys.
yeah, absolutely.
I
Um,
mine's in the shop, and I don't know how many times we sat there waiting on parts to come in, and we just go, "What can we fiddle with just to learn more?"
I what is that? Bench racing is what we referred to it back in the day. It was like, oh, I can't go out and drive it, but we can fiddle around with it and make some changes. It's bench racing is what it is. So that being said, with the shock setup and stuff, the other thing that you brought up
Tri-
earlier, Alex, shock angles.
Trial and error.
Yeah, well, yeah, that too. Um, so would you get your shock or your axle angles to?
16 degrees.
60 degrees. So um I'm a we all run CVs on these machines, CV axles.
Yeah.
Um
Well,
the
unless you're Sebastian.
there is a couple of buggies out there that we know that have some
Straight axle.
straight axle conversions done on them, and don't get me wrong, they're cool. So this doesn't pertain to you. But CV angle CV angles on some of these. So I've done it. You've done it. Oh, we did a lift kit, put preload in the suspension to clear these big tires, and now we have shitty axle angles. Um, most manufacturers, I won't say most, all manufacturers have a limit on the angle that they can run these axles at, whether it's 25, 30 degrees, 35 degrees. Um, that's typically about the max on a CV axle before it basically gets to a point where it fails. Whether it breaks a cup, it busts a cage, um, so on and so forth. Most of these stock machines that come out nowadays are somewhere between 0 and 5 degrees is what they run at, and it's to do axle. It's to save on the axle life itself. Now your front CVs see a little bit more abuse just because of the turning.
That, and I was going to say, normally because of that, the way they're set up, they have a lot more cast camber than your rears.
Right, but that's what I'm getting at. So you're
Your
turning.
articulation is
Not
higher.
only are you going up and down and changing that angle, but you're also turning left and
Yeah.
right. So you're you're always at an angle, at least on the front, where
Right.
where the rears are just up and down pretty much. Um, like I said, the 25 to 35 degrees is typically the max for axles. Now, granted, you get a little bit longer axle. That fixes the axle angle issue. The shorter the axle, the harder it is to put a lift in without getting to an extreme axle angle.
So I've been extremely fortunate with my Honda. I've been running OEM axles. I've never changed an axle. They've been my 2019 I never blew an axle. My 2022 I never blew an axle. But with this new suspension, I have changed to Rhino 2.0s. Now, doing the research on the Rhino 2.0s, nothing against anybody. As soon as you do research and you start looking at reviews of certain things, you see the good and you see the bad.
Absolutely.
My fear is a lot of the reviews that I read said that brand new one ride and they were blowing axles. They were blowing cups, cages in the CV axle. And that's a concern of mine. Are these weak axles? It's just when you're running something new, you have concerns.
Absolutely.
That being said, because of my experience and the research that I was doing, I also found that a lot of these people that are complaining about blowing axles up are also running an 8-inch lift, severe axle angles, and they ride hard. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, if that's your style of riding, that's your style of riding. I don't ride that way, so my concerns have lessened. Keeping my axle angles down instead of being at a severe axle angle, and because I don't ride that hard, I'm more of a cruiser. My fears have lessened, and it's not something I'm too terribly worried about now, so that's a plus.
I had rhinos in when I did the long travel kit in my Arctic Cat. I beat the snot out of that machine.
Those were
Jumped
great
it.
axles.
I never had an issue out of those rhinos. Not one issue out of those rhinos.
All I'm saying is the reviews that I've read,
and it's
the people that I've talked to.
Like you said earlier, there's going to be good and bad. There's people that complain about Cobras. There's people that complain about Turners.
Well,
There's people that complain about OEM.
Well, I was going to say, look, you do the same thing with stereo systems. You bring up stereo systems. How many times do you look on Facebook and you see somebody go, man, what's the best axle I should run? And you get 30 different answers and you get somebody that complains about each one of them.
Absolutely.
Same thing with stereo. What's the best stereo equipment? I'm partial to DS18. I've had really good luck with DS18. I know people who can't keep DS18s because they blow them. I get it. I understand it. Some people have bad luck with that stuff. Some people just don't like it. They don't think that's that great of a brand. That's fine. You want to run Rockford, run Rockford. If you want to run Memphis, run Memphis. If you want to run Pile, run Pile. Scar. I mean, run what you want to run. Do what you want to do. The only thing I'm trying to get into with this tech talk ish episode, which I kind of want to get away from it a little bit, is do your research and don't just listen to one or two people and let them say, hey, just do this, just do that. Do your own research, read the reviews, check into these things, and understand, all right, so that person says don't get that because that's junk. Well, why? Well, I had one on my Ranger that was jacked up 8 inches, 8-inch portals, and when I went into this hole after I put it in, it blew up the first time. Well,
yeah, but
you're talking that's severe duty, severe beating, and a lot of these axles, a lot of things have break-in periods.
Well, and I was going to get to that. And so a lot of people don't realize that brand new CV axle is supposed to be broken. It's supposed to be heat cycled, just like a CVT belt.
Yep.
You're supposed to cycle these CV joints to break them in. Now, do we all do that? No. I've thrown brand new CVT belt in and ran it and not had an issue. I put another CVT belt in, brand new, and had one give up the ghost after one ride. Same thing with CV axles, but it's just like any other thing. I've seen CV axles be bad right from the manufacturer.
Absolutely. I've had a couple do that, like literally install them in the machine, go to take it for a test drive,
and it popped.
And yep, and you've got to pop an axle.
So it's one of those deals when you're dealing with aftermarket parts, there's going to be some bad experiences. It's just
Absolutely.
it's inevitable. But that being said, just because you had a bad experience doesn't mean it's a bad product.
Right.
You might have got the one off, the luck of the draw. You got the one that was made at 5 o'clock on Friday.
8 o'clock Monday morning or 5 o'clock Friday.
Right.
And
It's just
that's
one of
just it.
those deal.
That's
And it's
like I
those.
said, the whole reason I wanted to have this conversation is people asked for a little bit more of an elaboration from non-experts, and like I said, I'm not an expert at all. If people want to hear from an expert, we can try to find one.
The only thing, if you really have questions about suspension setups and stuff like that, I will point whoever asks me to shock therapy.
Well, and that's just it.
That is their
Google is your friend.
absolutely shock therapy. That is their bread and butter. I had a nice conversation with the guys from shock therapy last year at Mud Nats. I talked to them for probably a couple of hours, just asking them questions. Because their stuff is racing and dune riding. High speed stuff. I had the conversation. It's all right. You guys because you're here at Mud Nats, are you guys gonna get into the mud world? And there was like, absolutely, we're looking into it. You guys are running those of us that ride the mud world. We have all this extra stereo equipment, the 200 pounds in the cooler, for trail sodas and stuff. Rigs are fully loaded down. We're running these portals with these huge tires, and we're putting massive amounts of stress on the suspension, whether it's the suspension arm itself, the ball joint, the shock eyelet, running a bunch of preload in the shock itself, and asking these machines to do way more than what they were ever designed to do. Even though we're going 5 mile an hour down the trail, sipping on a beer.
I've seen bad wrecks at 5 miles an hour.
I have too, but that, like I said, shock therapy has a lot of great information out there that I wish we could show some of that on some of these podcasts that we do, and maybe later on down the road we can get to that point.
We're working on it. The new podcast studio is coming along very well. I did a little TikTok the other day.
Yep, I saw the TikTok.
The room looks great. Shout out to Silverback for that one. Those guys are freaking killing it over there.
I'm hoping that we can get a little bit more technical. We'll see how this episode goes, and maybe Alex and Bruce will let me nerd out a little bit more.
With the feedback that we've gotten, it's been discussed. This is kind of a little bit of a test run. I know Bruce isn't here. He's like me. He doesn't really want to get into the technical stuff, but it's good information. And there's times like, well, today, for instance, that I kind of want to get into the technical stuff. So, the main thing is with these technical, I don't want to turn it into a full on tech talk. I still want to keep it light, and I want it for somebody who has no idea what we're talking about, at least get a little bit of information out of it. So even out of this whole conversation that we just had about suspension and shock setup, if they just go, hey, they said if I tighten this collar down, it'll be higher ride height and tighter suspension, and I don't want tight suspension. So maybe I shouldn't mess with that. Maybe I should look into changing A-arms, or maybe I should look into just buying a bracket lift.
And that's kind of the nice thing. You brought up the bracket lift. That going to a bracket lift, because you're not making any changes on the shock other than possibly moving the shock mounting location, whether you're laying the shock up or laying it down a little bit more.
Right.
You're going to stay fairly close to factory ride. That is probably the biggest thing that I look for in the machine is what's the ride quality like? I'm old. I don't like being bounced around and beat up. Like, we're all out there to have a good time and enjoy being out in the woods.
I don't want to
And
get home and feel like I've been hit by a bus.
yeah, and a lot of us spend multiple days out riding,
Yep.
and by the time you get home on Sunday evening, it's like, all right, well, I'm home, I'm done riding, but there's got to unload the truck, got to wash clothes, got to clean the buggy out, got to throw all the garbage away, so on and so forth. If I ride all weekend and I've been beat up all weekend by riding around, I don't want to do that when I get home.
Oh, agreed wholeheartedly.
you know, if you have a little bit better ride quality to where you're not being beat up, it's like, all right, well, I don't feel so bad.
Right.
Maybe I go get my truck cleaned out and I'll get the buggy rinsed off at least.
Yep. So,
So,
well, at this point in time, I want to thank our sponsors. This episode of the Full Send Off Road Podcast is sponsored by 361 Racing. Don't mess with Texas. Visit their Facebook page at Texas Side by Side Drag Racing.
hey,
Dale's Fun Center.
congratulations to
Oh,
Berta
oh yeah, 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 yeah.
this
Mm,
past weekend.
yep. Uh, we've got that was stock class, right? She
Stock
won stock class.
class.
Yeah, stock
Yes.
class. Uh, Another sponsor, Dale's Fun Center, giving family fun for over 40 years. Visit dalesfuncenter.com when you're in the mood for a Kawasaki Honda. KB Longhorn Welding LLC. Visit them on Facebook at KB Longhorn Welding. My boy Corey built some parts for my side by side. Give him a shout if you're looking for some custom parts. And then last but not least, our friends over at Trashy Inc. Not just a brand, it's a lifestyle. Make sure to visit them and buy all your merch at trashyinc.life. Or if you're in the neighborhood of Elite Power Sports there in Louisiana, go visit Anthony and Kelly over there. Trashy Inc. has their storefront also there at Elite Power Sports. Go visit them over there, say hi, and get your trashy gear.
Yeah. Speaking of Anthony, when are we going to get him on here?
I know we need to. Anthony, if you're listening, hit me up, dude. We need to get him on here.
I need an update on Rougarou.
I need to bug him about Rougarou. Him and Trey. Well, I don't think Trey will come on, but
Maybe we can get both of them on. That'd be
right,
pretty fun.
maybe. Well, what we need to do is we need to take a trip over there. So, that being said, let's get into that also. Upcoming events, which has kind of become one of our bread and butter things to announce on here is the upcoming events. So this past weekend was the Average Joe's Bounty Hole. Into Mud Off Road. I'm gonna pull that one up real quick. Because for some reason,
Do we get results on that one? Are they out yet? Do you know?
I
I haven't seen anything.
I haven't seen the actual results. They took some pictures and showed who won what, but like no actual results. And because they did them in posts on Facebook, I don't want to like sit here and spend 20 minutes searching through all the posts.
Absolutely. Yeah, I got to see a couple of videos of a couple of people making runs, but I
Yeah.
didn't see who won what or anything like that. So that's why I was asking.
Right. Do 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 do. Man, I see. Whatever. Anyway, the
Awkward
average Joe's
silence.
Bounty Hole. Yeah. Well, it's not awkward silence. Silence. I had this pulled up, and for some reason now that specific there it is. The specific post I had disappeared, so I had to go search for it. Average Joe's Bounty Hole that was this past weekend, the 15th through the 17th. They did over $6,500 in payouts. They had a small tire class, a big tire class, and an outlaw class. My understanding is that it ended up being a spectacular event. Everybody that I've talked to said that it was awesome. Their next event, which was the other thing that I was looking for that disappeared on me, is not announced. I guess. We'll have to look those up and get back to that one. But that's That's the Average Joe's Bounty Hole. That's into Mud Off Road. They did that at Tower Tracks this past weekend. So if you were out that way, you know, it would have been a good show to go check out. Battle of the Builds. Battle of the Builds. Stop number 2 is at Tower Tracks. That's in May. That's the 24th through the 27th. I don't know if Bruce and Aaron are going to make it because that's really far in advance. I know I am saying I will be there. I missed stop 1. I will not miss stop 2. So if you happen to see me out there at Tower Tracks, it's going to be my first time. I would love to meet up with some locals and really get a lay of the park. I've heard it is a great park to go visit. I want to go visit it. So this is a great opportunity to go. Not only that, JR and Alan, that my understanding is that's y'all's local park that you like to go to. So I expect the welcome wagon when I get there. After that, they've got July 26th through the 28th. They're going to be at Sabine for stop number 3. And then November 8th through the 10th, they're going to be back at River Run for stop number 4. So look for Battle of the Builds for their upcoming events. And then the next event that I will be at is going to be Mud Nationals. Mud Nationals is also going to have the Southern Bounty Series during that event going on. That's at Sabine ATV Park in Burkeville, Texas, the 4th through the 7th of April. Ooh, excuse me. Getting this thing to load. And really,
While you're waiting on that, so June 7th and 8th. Correct, Alex?
June, yes.
June 7th and 8th is the second annual STX Showdown. That's going to be at Mud Buddies, our local park. That's presented by 361 Racing and Silverback Garage. And they'll have a medium tire class, a small tire class, and then also sand drags.
And the RC sand.
And the RC racing, yes, that's being put on by Dirty Money. So they are currently taking information for vendors
and sponsors.
and sponsors. So
anybody listening would like to help sponsor that event, please give Silverback Garage a call. You can also get a hold of Brody Fisher, 361 Racing on Facebook, for any information on that.
And then also Silverback Garage on Facebook.
Yes. All right. So, High Lifter Mud Nationals. We have High Lifter has announced who the bands that are going to be playing for that event. On Friday the 5th is going to be Demon Jones and Grant Gilbert. And then on the 6th is going to be Bubba Wesley and Chris Cagle. I've seen Bubba Wesley several times. Awesome show. I've never seen Chris Cagle. I'm looking forward to it because let's just face it, that's the country that I grew up on. So, and I like Demon Jones, so I'm looking forward to that one too. So, I last year I didn't get to see any of well, we kind of saw the concert, but didn't really pay attention much to it. This year I want to check out the concerts. Even if we just set off back and chill, I want to go check. Let me. Do they have? I'm trying to pull up the actual list of events. Event schedule. There
They have it on highlifter.com.
I got it. So the gates are going to open April 3rd at 8 a.m. Vendor Village opens at 9 a.m. High Lifter trailer opens at 9 a.m. High Lifter information registration tent opens at Vendor Village at 9 a.m. So to register for the MSA Wheels Show and Shine and Can-Am Poker Run at the High Lifter information booth at 9 a.m. When is... Sorry, I'm looking to see when they're gonna do the show and shine because I think I might enter the Honda. That's right. The Honda's gonna be debuted at Mud Nats. Awkward silence. Just sit there and shake your head.
I'm waiting for you to spit out the rest of what you was gonna say.
3 p.m. They're gonna do the Plinko in the High Lifter area of Vendor Village. 7 p.m. High Lifter merchandise store closes, and then 8 p.m. kickoff party and bonfire in the field behind Vendor Village. That's on Wednesday. On Thursday, day 2, the 4th, Vendor Village opens at 9. Information registration tent opens up at 9. The play musical chairs for prizes in the High Lifter game area across from Vendor Village is at 11. Plinko in the High Lifter area at 4. 5 p.m. is the poker run. 7 p.m. is the merchandise trailers closing, and 9 p.m. the poker run ends. Day 3 schedule, the 5th. Vendor Village 9. High Lifter tent 9. They're going to do Plinko again at 10. Competitors line up for, okay. So competitors are lining up for the MSA Wheels Show and Shine in the High Lifter game area across from Vendor Village at 11 a.m. on day 3, April 5th. Sweet. Noon to 1, they're going to do the Show and Shine competition. Noon to 2 is registration for the Southern Bounty Series drag races at the drag strip. So they're also having drag races, not just Bounty Hole.
Well, they did drag racing last year too.
Yeah, but everything that I've seen so far has just been, it's the Southern Bounty Series.
And
they didn't.
That's the big event for Saturday.
Yeah. No, this is Friday. This is Friday.
No. Right, but what I'm saying is the Bounty Hole series for Southern Bounty is on Saturday.
Oh, okay. 2 p.m. is the drivers' meeting for the drag racing. 3 p.m. is musical chairs. 3 p.m. is also the drag racing at the drag strip, is when that starts. And then Demon Jones goes on at 8. Well, Demon Jones with special guest Grant Gilbert. So Grant Gilbert would probably go on at 8. Demon probably go on at 9.
Yeah, probably.
So day 4, Saturday, April 6th. Vendor Village at 9. The High Lifter 10 at 9. 9 to 11 registration opens for the Bounty Hole racing at the race site. 11 a.m. drivers meeting. 11 a.m. the audio forum sound competition in the High Lifter game area. Noon is going to be the Bounty racing, starts at noon, and then 3 p.m. is the Plinko. 7 p.m. High Lifter merchandise trailer closes, and 8 p.m. Chris Cagle with special guest Bubba Wesley. And that, my friends, is the High Lifter Mud Nats. I'm excited. We went last year. I had a blast. I had a great time. I know some bad weather rolled in and kind of messed with everybody's weekend. I feel for anybody who was tenting it. I'm sure that was a little rough.
Well, last year, let's see, we had the power outage. We had a few people in our group get sick.
Yep.
Under the weather. We had the horrible weather, so
let's see. So Southern Bounty Series, like I said, they're going to be at Mud Nats the 4th through the 7th in Burkeville. Their next event after that is April 12th through the 14th in Piedmont, Alabama at Indian Mountain. Then they're going to be at Mud Jam at Top Trails May 3rd through the 5th. Then they're going to be at Visions Mid-America Outdoors June 14th through the 15th in Jay, Oklahoma. The Snow Barons Heydays. That one is up in North Branch, Minnesota. That is September 7th through the 8th. And then back to Sabine for Halloween, the October 31st through November 3rd in Burkeville. And then the World Championship event is to be determined. So Tony is Tony Ramos, the guy who's been putting on the Southern Bounty Series. Been doing a great job, really getting that event going and off the ground. I've seen some great action, some great racing from that event. Same thing with Battle of the Builds, Alan and Jeff and those guys over there at Battle of the Builds. Every time I go, it's a great time. It's great racing. It's good fun. It's a great show. Even if you don't have a side by side or a 4-wheeler or anything, go check out the racing. You can take your family out there, and it's. I try to explain it to people that it's like going to a monster truck show. You're not there to be the rider. You're there to watch. It is a spectator. It's a show. It's a show. So, if you're listening to this and you're on the fence about going to some of these events, STX is coming up. That's another one. If you're down in the South Texas area where we're at, it's going to be closer to home. You can go check out that event. But if you're around any of these others, get out there and watch. You might spark something in you that says, "Hey, I'm going to go buy a 4-wheeler and get into this." So the only thing I can say is get out there and ride. And mine's been in the shop, so I haven't been able to get out there and ride.
Well, that's me. I've been laid up, so.
Well, we all know you're broken and you ain't riding anytime soon. Sucks for you.
It does suck. Like this, it's not being able to do anything is driving me insane.
I bet. I absolutely fucking bet.
My wife has told me, she's yelled at me a few times about quit pacing.
I guarantee you, I know that you are just absolute just going batshit crazy.
I am. So
oh, that's right. I forgot about that. I would like to announce this one. March 23rd, team knockout races at in Troy, Missouri, the Lincoln County Fairgrounds. That's the one that's being put on by Jim Trenary. I don't know how to pronounce that last name. I do apologize. But it's also Bryce Sparks, Whiskey Biz. They're helping John Whaley. They're helping put that on. Grace Rhodes, Paige Sparks, Jason Evers. They're all putting that event on. I really hope them the best with this event. My understanding is it's the first event. I'm not 100% on that, but my understanding is it's the first event. So good luck with that, guys. Go out and check out some great racing on that. I'm not 100% on understanding how that works. Do you know how team knockout racing works?
I have no clue. I haven't, because it's not in our general neck of the woods. I haven't, other than the couple of Facebook posts that I've seen from those guys. I haven't really been following it. I'm afraid to follow too much because I might get super interested in it because I like racing.
Well, so this is this is just on their Facebook page. It says, "Come watch side by side racing. This event is a 2-person team race. 2 teams will race each other. Winner advances to the next round until one remains."
So it's kind of a last man standing.
Yeah, but how do you do it with
two teams race? The winner moves on, the loser's out.
Yeah, but it's a 2-person. So if I win, say we're on a team and I win and you lose, and we're on the same team, does that mean the team is out?
I have no clue.
That's what I'm getting at. They do say that this is kid friendly. Racing starts at 5 p.m. Signups are at 4. Anybody can enter these races. There is no trail riding at this event, unfortunately. But if you're competing, awesome. If not, awesome. They're doing it just as they're doing it as a racing event, and then they said there's going to be a heck of an after party. So, like I said, good luck to those guys. Like, I hope it turns out great, and love to see some footage on it and see exactly how that goes for them. What else? Any other events that you know of going on here?
I think with that one coming up this next weekend, and then the big one is Mud Nats at the beginning of April.
Right.
I haven't I haven't
Rednecks with
really.
Paychecks was this past weekend.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah, videos for that should be surfacing here in the next day or two.
they're already making the
But I
rounds.
I know there's a few, but the big whole weekend compilation videos is what I was getting at.
Yeah, 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 yeah. March 21st through the 24th in Jacksonville. So this weekend also. See, I knew there was another one that I seen. The Teach 'em One Bounty Kids Bounty Hole series is at River Run. It's the Mud Mayhem Kids Bounty Hole, Wheel of Fortune, Scavenger Hunt, Cornhole games. This is the fourth season. Um, and their stop this stop is at River Run. So this is a bounty hole racing series for the kids. There's multiple what's the word I'm looking for here?
Classes.
Yes, that's the word I'm looking for. Multiple classes. So uh make sure to check out the Teach 'em Young Bounty Hole series website.
Yeah, because we've been to a couple events where the Teach 'em Young was going on, and just to see all the kids out there and watch the kids have fun. And I got news for you: the kids are just as competitive as us adults when it
Oh
comes to
yeah,
that, if
absolutely.
not more. And they throw caution to the wind. Um, the kids have zero fear whatsoever. So it's always a good time to go check that out. And um, Megan and them do a great job putting that event on.
Absolutely, 100%. We had Megan on here and had her talk about that. So if you do want any more information about that, if about that series, if you go back in our episodes, the one with Diamond Dust on there, and Megan Ryan, she's got some great information in there. You can also visit their Facebook page and their website. Um, their Facebook page, is Teaching Young Kids Bounty Hole on Facebook. I just wanted to make sure I didn't get it wrong when I said it. And then you can also go directly to their website at uh, teachemyoungkidsbountyhole.com and then email for any information at diamonddustoffroad@gmail.com. So that's getting the kids out there. Like I'm bring up the next generation of mud racers.
Absolutely.
So
Get them interested in something else other than looking at their phones or tablets.
agreed. Um, what else? What else? What else? I don't really see anything. Nothing standing out to me right now. Uh, oh, any drag racing going on? Do 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 do. Has Brody posted anything? That's the question. Um, nope, just from the races this past weekend. Um, up in Winoka and America's Oasis, the drag races, the sand drags that they had up there. Once again, congratulations to Roberta Fisher, uh, Dustin Couch, do do do. And well, I think that's about it. Uh, Once again, if you have any questions, comments, or anything like that for us, uh, you can email us directly at full send podcast mail. That's full send podcast mail at gmail.com. You can get me on TikTok at Full Send Off Road Podcast on TikTok. look for more videos. I'm trying to do more and more. I know I keep saying I'm going to do more and more, but it is really hard to make sure that I'm getting the good content that I think our viewers and listeners want. You can also get me on Facebook, Full Send Off Road Podcast on Facebook. We try to be as active as possible on there. I do want to put a shout out real quick to M4 Fadworks and Hell Yeah Racing, two of the companies that sent us stickers and whatnot for the table. We do appreciate that. Thank you. What else you got, Aaron?
You can get us on Instagram at Full Send Off Road Podcast. And then myself on TikTok at Jeep SMP. Comments. Send us a message if you got questions about something. Or if you guys want to hear something different on the podcast. Because us two do other stuff other than side by side stuff. So we are into other stuff too. So
Yes.
But other than that's pretty much all I had, Alex.
If anybody's still listening, thank you. I know it's a little different without Bruce here. He kind of adds a comedic relief that we don't necessarily have all the time. In other words, Bruce, you're missed again. Please like, comment, share, ring that bell for notifications. That's Bruce's line, and he's not here, so I'm doing it so he can be
Right.
like,
The bell down there, down.
Oh, now you're gonna make me put a card. It's actually like
No,
right. It's like there.
That corner.
Yeah, and then in that corner you can check out that. Oh, hold on. Let's do that one. Ooh, nope. Sorry. That way. Right here. Click right here for last week's episode. Let's do that. I'll be that guy. So all right. Well, thanks everybody, and we'll see y'all next week.